a group, a committee, you know, a think tank, but an action tank, in fact, for catalyzing change in early childhood. So anyone who has an interest in, you know, changing the world through early childhood, as we will hopefully have shown, is the way to do it, or a chief way to do it. Would they please put their names and email IDs in the chat so that we can round them up? Now, who would like to say that? Sonal, do you feel you can say that? As
I would rather say, well, we talked that this is going to be about action. So can you both tell us what action are we leaving the session today with? And then
excellent.
I'll hand over to one of you.
And then Gayatri, do you want to take that one, darling? Or I'll do it if no one else wants to, but you know.
I felt, Julia, that Sonal should be the one summarizing it together, so it comes as a nice close towards the end.
Perfect, perfect. Julia, are you gonna talk as well?
I wasn't planning to, but if you'd like me to speak to kind of what the issue-based groups of Catalyst 2030 are about at the end, I'd be happy to do that.
I think the important thing to do is to, you know, I think they know pretty much about Catalyst. I think what's important to do is to say this particular session is, you know, was
9:31, so let's start. What time
all right, Sonal, you announce it and I will say it.
Yeah, Julia, what time does it finish?
On the hour.
Sonal, that means you might have to jump off earlier. I'll take it if you're not there. Don't worry, let's go.
Smt.K.R.S started life as a WhatsApp group among social entrepreneurs, connecting to envision real transformational change. Launched at the World Economic Forum in January 2020, it's grown into a global movement accelerating change to ensure the SDGs are reached by 2030. Fueled by passion, our 550 members working in 175 countries have collectively put in an amazing 50,000 volunteer hours, touching the lives of 2 billion people. And we're driven by values, to which we hold ourselves accountable. 2020 was a busy year, co-creating 3 reports with partners and producing one of our own. Inviting high-level guests to participate in the Catalyzing Change campaign, hosting fireside chats and expert hours, which will be continuing in 2021. To celebrate our achievements, together we placed our supporters in the limelight with the first Catalyst 2030 Awards for Systemic Change. With the blessing of the Dalai Lama, we celebrated finalists and winners in the following categories: special recognition for our early supporters, individual philanthropists, donor organizations, philanthropic intermediaries, corporate organizations, bi- and multilateral organizations, and 4 regional winners in the category of national governments. And now on to Catalyzing Change Week 2021. During this social entrepreneur-led event, we bring together diverse stakeholders in over 100 sessions to showcase their systems change efforts and the best practices that can accelerate our work in pursuit of the SDGs.
Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Julia, I'm with Catalyst 2030, and just some quick housekeeping real quick. This session will be recorded and uploaded to the Catalyst 2030 YouTube, which means that you'll be able to watch it afterwards and share it. But also, if you have any privacy concerns, please let me know and I'll put my email in the chat. And now I'd like to introduce Sonal, who will be moderating this event, and over to you.
Thanks, Julia. So, hi everybody, and another warm welcome to Catalyst 2030 Catalysing Change Week. Just saying that really energizes me, and I thank you for joining what is set to be a really engaging and energizing session today. My name is Sonal Sachdev Patel, and I'm the CEO of GMSP Foundation, which is a family foundation led by the values of shared humanity in championing community-led organisations working in India and in the UK. I want to take a moment before we begin to just acknowledge how exhausted many of us are from all of these webinars, all of these screen times, and frankly, all of this talking. None of us, I think, knew that it was going to go on for this long. And of course, there is a place for dialogue, but what we really need is action. And I can assure you that that action is precisely what Think Equal and Learning Curve have in mind. And one of the reasons that I feel so excited about both of these organisations. So in my view, there are 4 ingredients that are needed for change to be truly catalysed. The first of those is an evidence-based programme. The second is partnerships that really work to the strengths of each partner to implement that programme. The third is enlightened policymakers, and thankfully there are a few of those dotted around the world, and excuse my cynicism. And finally, unrestricted, flexible funding to realise that work. And all 4 of those ingredients were purposefully gathered for this panel. Unfortunately, one of them, Lakshmi Devi, who is the Joint Director of the Telangana Ministry of Women and Child Development, can't join us today, but we're really grateful to her for her continued support and her engagement. So let me start by introducing you to the 2 incredible women that we have on our panel today. I'll start with Gayatri from Learning Curve. She is one of the partners who, along with Think Equal, will be implementing the Early Years programme in Telangana. Gayatri Natarajan is the co-founder and head of curriculum at Learning Curve Foundation, which is a non-profit organisation that empowers children from under-resourced and vulnerable backgrounds through a social, emotional development approach. Gayatri is an educator with significant work experience of over 12 years in the education industry in the areas of teaching, designing and implementing curriculum for both preschool and primary environments, startup and management of preschools, design and delivery of social emotional learning for middle and high school children from marginalised communities, and teacher training. So it's fair to say she is an expert in her field. And secondly, Leslee Udwin, who is the founder and executive chair of Think Equal. Leslee is a former filmmaker whose films have always campaigned for social justice, and some of which have won several awards, including the BAFTA, which is like the British Oscar, the Peabody, and the Amnesty International Media Award. Leslee is now a campaigner for a system change in education. Leslee was voted by the New York Times as the 2nd most impactful woman of 2015, second to Hillary Clinton. That's always the question I think that people ask, who is first? And she's also been awarded the prestigious Swedish Anna Lindh Human Rights Prize. Leslee's list of achievements and accolades go on, and I would encourage you to Google her so you can get a really full insight into her amazing life and career. But I can tell you from my perspective that Leslee is someone that everybody wants on their team. She is the most committed, empathetic, brilliant leader that I know, and she is able to inspire little tiny children to teachers, to government leaders, to funders. And I'm so excited that we will all have the opportunity to hear her speak today. So just taking a step back and thinking about the week as a whole, I know that there'll be many topics in this week of catalytic change, and that's really important. And I can tell you from a personal perspective that at GMSP Foundation, we also fund a range of areas, from health to nutrition to violence against women. But we recognise that all of these are just funding the symptoms. And that's important in the emergency that we face in our world today. But it's like applying a Band-Aid. And I know that if we want to see a different world, if we want to see a peaceful and harmonious world, then social and emotional learning for our children is the answer. So we would very much like this to be an interactive session. There's nothing worse than having a webinar on in the background while you're brushing your teeth or making your breakfast. We want you to get the most out of this session. So please ask questions in the chat and I'll do my best to come to each one of them in the last 10 minutes of the panel. But without delaying you any further, I'd like to start with the first question, which I'd ask you, Leslie, to lead with. It's a simple, but it's an important question. Why early childhood?
Sonal, before I answer, I just have to say thank you for those extraordinarily eloquent words and incisively looking at this topic with such respect and gravitas that it deserves. So to the question, why early childhood? Well, it's a great question because this appears to be the world's best kept secret, really. I mean, every now and again, an atrocity will grab the headlines, like the rape and murder of Sarah Everard here in the UK recently. And then suddenly you'll get an enlightened article, as we've had here in the Guardian newspaper, a lone voice asking, shouldn't we think about educating our boys early to respect women? I mean, truly, why early childhood? The shortest way to answer the question is this. For the same reason as no competent architect would start building a house, let alone a skyscraper, without putting in the foundations first. And we've been witnessing in these various development emergencies that we're facing and actually engulfed in, that the absence of foundations, the discriminatory mindset, for example, is the disease. The outcome is that violence, the abuse that you spoke about, we've been dealing with by putting plasters on the wounds. Well, it really is time to tackle our problems at their root cause. And to do that, we have to go to early childhood. I mean, I need to make this very clear. I'm not saying that after the first 6 years of life, human beings can't change. Of course they can. The brain is neuroplastic for the duration of one's lifetime. You can buttress a building after it's been built and starts showing the cracks, but is that not tantamount to putting the plasters on the wounds? You can spend a lot of money, trillions of dollars if you want to get this right, with several sessions of therapy, trying to get a human being, a youth, an adult, to unlearn what they've learned wrong and to relearn those non-academic competencies and skills that are needed to be a decent and responsible citizen. But it makes no sense, does it? Not to teach the pro-social attitudes to begin with. And it is so cheap. We now have a program, a partnership, several partnerships actually around the world that are cheap, replicable, scalable. This should be, compulsory to teach our children social and emotional learning in their very early years. How can we who pretend to, take seriously our duty of care to our children, how can we say, well, it's compulsory for our children to learn numeracy and literacy, but it's optional for them to learn how to value another human being. And it's optional for them to learn how to lead healthy relationships. This is ridiculous. And this cannot be optional. It's irresponsible. It's negligent. Over the last 60 years, we are so in love, aren't we, with metrics and measuring actually, I sometimes think we measure in order to delay action. But look, over the last 60 years, there have been many studies, a plethora of them, proving that the positive results of early childhood education in social emotional learning last into adulthood when taught. Adults aged 40, in a study by Barnett from 2011, adults aged 40 who had been taught quality social emotional learning in their early years, before the age of 6, had higher earnings, committed fewer crimes, were more likely to hold a job and graduate from high school. And these were long-term effects, they were lifetime effects. There's another study by Caroli et al. From 2005, which proves that early childhood quality education in social emotional learning provides up to $17 return to the community for every dollar invested. And there's a similar study by James Heckman, Nobel laureate, who came to the same conclusion about the return on investment, and also proved in that study that as they got older, these children also had improved academics and productivity and lower social costs like prison and welfare. Then there's, another study by Durlach evidencing that academic performance was increased by 11 to 17%. So it is a no-brainer. There's ample evidence from the last 60 years. Why is it the best kept secret in the world? Is it because there's a long-term view to be taken here? Is it because politicians think in the short term and think about who's going to be voting for them in the next election? Well, it's sure not the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds and the 6-year-olds. So could that be the reason for this negligence and apathy? At any rate, as Sonal pointed out, there are enlightened policymakers. The Ministry of Women and Child Welfare in Telangana is one such. The State Ministry of Rajasthan is another. The Education Ministry of Belize. Deborah Domingo, who is she's now left, as they tend to move on, education ministers, with alarming alacrity. But Deborah signed an agreement with Think Equal, whereby every 3 to 5-year-old child in the whole country of Belize will be taught this social emotional learning program compulsorily. The word compulsorily is in our agreement. It's the thing I'm proudest of, because this is what we must all do. And so, these are early childhood years. I realize I'm going on, but this is the key, isn't it? It's the most important. And Gayatri, if you feel we're starting to run out of time, I give you extra time on the next question.
No worries, Leslie, go ahead.
I can't stop this role. Okay. These are the sensitive, they're the influential years of brain development, where these foundations can be built for positive life outcomes. So, if any of you want further studies, I have got a pile of studies this high from the last 60 years, and I would happily give them to you. I'm going to put my email in the chat. There are 2 graphs I just want to quickly show you, if I may. So I hope I have sharing. Do I share screen? Yes, there they are. So look, the first of these here, this is from Harvard's Center for the Developing Child. This shows you the whole analysis of various skills and competencies in the developing brain. And what you see on the lower axis is the years 0 onwards. We stop at 7 for the purposes of what I want to show you is the evidence of what happens to two aspects of social and emotional competencies and skills. And here they are, whoops, in the next slide, habitual ways of responding. See how they start to flatline at the age of 6? Obviously, the maximum intensity of neuroplasticity in the developing brain is in the earliest years, even before 4. So, you know, at 2, at 1, look, at birth, here's another graphic that shows you the number of neurons that there are in the early years of life. At birth, on the extreme left-hand side, age 6 in the middle, and look what happens by age 14. The brain starts to pare away all of those neural connections that have not been practiced, that have not been used, and that's a process called pairing. But there is absolutely no doubt, and I'm going to stop sharing now, there's no doubt that, you know, the early years are the time to create sensitive, responsible, loving, empathetic human beings. In a nutshell, and I'm going to stop now, what Think Equal does is it co-creates, very simply, co-creates with the children neural pathways in the developing brain that are pro-social. And it practices experientially those competencies so that, you know, a child who grows up will not be able to admit stereotypes and discriminations, won't be able to grow up and rape, won't be able to grow up and become depressed because they'll have the tools to deal with that, won't be able to grow up and commit suicide or abuses, will have a moral compass. So early childhood is the gateway to tackling the root cause of all of our ills, of discrimination, of violence, and it holds the key to sustainable development. That's why early childhood.
Thank you, Leslie. That's a very full answer to a very short question, but I appreciate that. Gayatri, would you like to add anything to that, or would you like me to move on?
I will just add a couple of, Leslie, you pretty much explained it so beautifully. But I always come up to this question, and we always hear when they say that, you know, children are our future. And if we want our future to be peaceful, to be a better society, then obviously we have to start now when they are children. So there's no better reason than this to start working with young children.
You're so right, and I think that's such a good encapsulation of the head and the heart. Like, actually, our heart tells us that it's the right answer, but seeing that neuroscience and seeing the science behind all of it, I think, is that just really cements, you know, the persuasive argument that why is this the best kept secret? So I think if we were to say we all agreed with you in theory, in ideology, can you then explain to us what are the ingredients to bring this all together? How do you actually make it happen? Gayatri, I'll go to you first on that, please.
Yes. So, heard the statement, it takes a village to raise a child. And they are definitely not wrong when they say that. And Leslie, as you pointed out, a lot of the brain activity happens by the time the child is 6, right? And when we are saying that a child should learn literacy, numeracy, bombard them with as many concepts, why not talk about these skills? I mean, children are not born with these biases. They're not born with these stereotypes. Then when they show these behaviors when they are adults, then what has actually changed? It's basically the input. As we say, that children observe a lot more than they listen. So the society, the community, the people around, teachers, schools, everybody is in some way or the other contributing to what a child is learning, which is why in our program, we felt that all the stakeholders in a child life, which is essentially the parents, the school, the teachers, need to role model, practice role model, and be vigilant, alert all the time into how they behave, how they talk, what are they teaching. All of these are the ingredients that can contribute into a healthy early childhood development. So when we talk about this, it's very easy to say, okay, we have a curriculum, all of that, but if the teacher or a parent is not really role modeling it, then how is the child going to understand it? It's going to be confusing, right? Let's say, for example, that the teacher, a child gets into an argument with another child and say, pushes him, and the teacher is, and teacher intervenes and says, no, you're not supposed to do this. But at the same time, the teacher is also getting angry with somebody else somewhere else. The child is going to say, how can you stop me? When you yourself do it. And that's where we feel that along with having a very strong curriculum that the child is able to understand age appropriately, there is a need for teachers to look at themselves, for parents to look at themselves, right? Simply put, that our teachers, many adults, right, we still are not aware of our own social and emotional status. We still don't know how we react, our impulsive behavior. We don't know that, and we have to accept it. It's the fact, right? And as I read somewhere, it's easier to teach children than repair broken adults. Right? So the point that we're trying to say is that teachers, instead of teachers have done a great job till now. No questions on their ability to teach, right? But teachers to look into themselves, because there is a huge factor. When I am aware of how I am, it's much easier for me to understand what the other person is going through. Right? You kind of start building an empathetic relationship, which is very, very important. So it's not just, as a teacher, you're not just teaching to count 1, 2, 3 or learn ABC, but you're actually teaching how do you manage stress, or what do you do when you're put in a spot? How do you adapt yourself? How do you think of alternative ideas? There is so much more we are teaching than just academic, right? So that's where the focus, when we do the teacher development with them, we talk about their own emotional intelligence. How are they able to engage with their child? Listening to a child is something that we don't do as teachers. And I'm speaking for me because I do come from the teaching background, because we are so occupied that when a child comes to us to talk about it, we're not really listening to them, actually listening to them, to what is going on with the child. And these are such young children that, they might not be able to verbalize what they're going through, but the teacher definitely as an adult has the capability to understand. So she can reach out to those little cues that these children give. And these have to be deliberately become a part of the way the teacher teaches. Right? How does she change mindsets? How does she become a mentor? How does she communicate? How does she collaborate? All of these things need to, he or she, right? How are these things deliberately structured into the development of a teacher so that it translates into a classroom? Could be simple thing as a stereotype, right? Like I just spoke, mostly I said she. How does she do it? These are subtle things that a teacher passes on to a child, which he or she needs to be very, very cognizant of. When this happens, there is a very strong relationship, that bond that forms between the child and the teacher, which creates an environment where the child feels safe, feels wanted. There is a sense of belonging, a care. And children always do better for people who show care. But when this is important, there comes a school element. So the school needs to be a place where the child wants to come. Unfortunately, currently, before COVID, the situation has been that the child is scared. Almost parents use that as a thing. If you trouble, I'll tell the teacher at school. It used to be a scary place. But and then we can't complain that children don't want to come to school, or children are being absent, because that sense of inclusion, this is my place. If we are able to bring the same feeling that the child has at home or a place where he's comfortable to experiment, to make mistakes, to learn, to fail, to try again, then definitely the child will want to come back and try, put more effort into learning.
Yeah, Gayatri, I love your child-centered approach and the fact that you really acknowledge that teachers have a huge part to play, and that we as adults actually often are broken ourselves, and therefore how can we be that example to our children. I just want to slightly go off the sort of format and bring in Louisa's question, because I think it's really important about what she's asking around how do you combat parenting techniques and different, parents are again, you can engage children through this curriculum, you can engage teachers through the teacher training. What do you do when at home children are facing a very different environment? And she asks, do you think that parents will learn from their children's learning? Gayatri or Leslie, who wants to take that?
I'd love to take that if I may.
Go on, yeah.
Look, Maria Montessori, who was probably one of the most enlightened educationalists in the world, said, a child is an agent. Actually, she didn't say this, but this is the effect, this is the kernel of meaning of the way she conceived of Montessori pedagogy. The child is the agent of social change, the agent. And upon my life, we have seen with the Think Equal program now in 16 countries, in 6 continents, on a virtually weekly basis, we get reports flooding in all the time from teachers, and so many of them are, of course, about the transformation of their children, a little child who comes racist at the age of 3 and is transformed within 4 months, or a violent child who's on the point of expulsion from a nursery school and turns into the kindest child in that class within 6 months. Miracles. But we also get stories about how parents are coming to the teacher and saying that tool that the children are talking about with the colors, how they learn what emotions and how to differentiate between emotions. Where can we get that? It is undoubtedly true that our children are teaching our parents when they have the program, the concrete roadmap, the tools, the exercises, the stories with which to teach them.
Yeah.
I cannot be overly optimistic in terms of our ability to change the parents without therapy and without a lot of time and money spent. I can't, with hand on heart, be optimistic about that. But I am absolutely certain that when the work you do is literally in the development of the brain of the child will go home, and whatever the circumstances are at home, the child will know wrong from right. The child will try to intervene. We've had children who say to their mother, very sensitively when their father's not around, "Mummy, it isn't right that daddy hits you, and you shouldn't let daddy hit you. And when you are blue, when you are in the blue, I can help you because I have exercises for breathing when you are in the blue." Literally, because the children's brains are firing 1 million neuroconnections per second. Isn't that amazing? It is the absolute truth. 1 million neuroconnections per second. So those children are able to teach the parents. Sonal, have we left the topic now of what the ingredients are? Because I'd love to talk about a few more, if I may, a few more ingredients.
Please do.
May I do that now? Okay. So look, we have to have the right environment. We have to have teachers who buy into this and understand the purpose and importance and have fire in their belly and get it, which is what Learning Curve so brilliantly does with teachers, makes them understand that they are actually holding our future in their hands. They are able to infuse these children and encourage in them these competencies and skills that will make the next generation what this generation ought to have been, right? But you also need, it's incomplete, this holistic approach, without the actual tools, the exercises, the books. And so the think equal piece of the jigsaw is that we have narrative as the primary method of our children's learning. It's the spine of our program. Why? I know as a former filmmaker that in order to create empathy in a tangible way in the developing brain, you can't do that merely cognitively or by, wagging a finger at a child and saying, put yourself in that person's shoes. How do you think that person's feeling? It's meaningless to that child until and unless its heart has been gripped. And you can only do that really through story and character and narrative. So we have books. I've got a few examples for you here. I Love My Planet. One of the competencies we teach is environmental stewardship. And all our books are illustrated by illustrators and writers from all over the world. So children are seeing diversity in all its glory in every book. Here's another one called Rainbows in Windows, a book we created for the pandemic with the World Health Organization. Again, different races and colors of human beings. Diego's great idea, inclusion. These are books that are teaching our 3-year-olds, the girl who climbed the tallest mountain. These grab the hearts of our children. They practice empathy in them. And then these empathetic neuropathways are formed. Our program is concretely over 30 weeks. It takes this subject as seriously as it takes numeracy. There are 3 lessons a week in order to repeat. So the teachers basically get the 24 books in each level. We have 3 age appropriate levels. Each level has 24 books, roughly, like the ones I've shown you on different topics. The teachers get a booklet of lesson plans, 90 of them for each level. And these are step-by-step guides, bullet point by bullet point of what the teacher needs to ask the children, discuss with the children, conclusions to come to, etc. And then they have a resource booklet. So look how concrete all of these, resources are. There's that mood meter that the child told the parent about, the colors through which to learn emotional literacy. Here is, I just have to very briefly show you this because I want you to know how concrete these ingredients have to be. Here is a resource that teaches our children that every human being on earth is brown. We're just different shades of brown. So when they call that girl white, the teacher calls it into question by saying, if she's white, what color is the piece of paper on the left-hand side of her portrait? It doesn't match her. And if she's black, well, what color is her hair then? So do you see how concrete these lessons are? That's an important ingredient.
And I'm really glad that you explained that, because sometimes we sort of hear these high-level solutions, but we don't exactly understand how it's going to work in practice. And that leads me on to my next question, is when you see 2 organisations like Think Equal and Learning Curve collaborating, it's exciting because, we're a global world and we want to see this kind of collaboration. But it also, coming from a strategy consulting background, it also makes me nervous because I think, when you have a partnership, there are so many things that can go wrong in that partnership. Sometimes it can be personalities, different, Gayatri, even listening to how you talk about schools. I'm so aware of the cultural difference, and I spend a lot of time in Indian schools as well. And teachers in different schools within India are so different. So I'd love for you to tell us how in practice do you collaborate? Like, what are the mechanics? What is it about your 2 organisations that's going to make this a successful partnership?
Okay.
Go for it, guys.
Sure. I think this was great for us, for both of us, in the sense that Learning Curve has been working in this space for the last 4-5 years with children from the age of 8 to 15, And it was both our mission is so aligned because we are looking at a global STEM change through social emotional learning, and that meant a lot for both of us. So it was only natural to get drawn towards each other's work for us, and it felt like a perfect puzzle piece that we just got together. And both are bringing our own expertise, where we have the strong beautiful curriculum that Think Equal has, which has been designed by the experts. It's also in multi-language. At the same time, we bring in the teacher development piece. How do we support the schools? How do we engage with the parents so that ultimately the child is benefited from all these angles? So that, in that sense, I think this is a great partnership for both of us, right, Leslie?
Absolutely, 100%. And you need partnerships. I mean, I need to remind us all that one of the Sustainable Development Goals is Goal 17, partnerships for the goals. And I think, one of the sadder things that I, as an interloper, have discovered. By the way, I need to explain my change of location and background. I need you to go and get this. I see the battery low sign coming up. I think, when I moved across about 5 years ago from filmmaking into activism and social entrepreneurship, I was shocked. I was shocked, I have to tell you, by the degree of territorialism I came across, the degree of a sort of obdurate mindset that said, no, we tackle it this way. We don't do it that way. We are still in an experimenting phase because we haven't yet tackled this issue. We haven't yet respected early childhood education. We are still, if you look at the American landscape, we are still paying teachers so little respect, so little money. I mean, the top 25 hedge fund managers in the USA earn more than all the kindergarten teachers in the USA put together. Can you imagine such a shocking travesty? What kind of values are these, right? So there is no one way to do it. We have to do it together, as Gayatri has so, persuasively explained to us. The mindset of the teachers is critical in this. Now, at Think Equal, we started off deciding, well, shall we start with the teachers? We decided no. The reason for that is simple. Nobody else seemed to be doing the tools for the little ones. And we knew how to do this. And we brought together a team of experts in neuroscience and psychology and our own wonderful Urvashi Sani. Do we have time to actually share a couple more slides? We're okay with time, aren't we? Yes. So I'm going to share the screen again. Here we go. Look, here are the experts we brought together to help us create these materials. Sir Ken Robinson, who sadly left the world last August, not just us. Barbara Isaacs, who's now president of Montessori Europe. Dr. Mark Brackett, Yale University Center for Emotional Intelligence. Dr. Sheila Wamahiu from Kenya, global representation of thought leaders. Vicky Colbert from Fundación Escuela Nueva in Colombia. Professor Richard Davidson, neuroscientist, head of the Healthy Minds Institute. And our very own wonderful Dr. Urvashi Sani, whom the catalyzers here from Catalyst 2030 will recognize. She is an expert in empowering girls through education. And together they helped us create, first, of course, the framework. What are these competencies the children need? And here they are, in this heart, 25 competencies and skills. It's not enough to say, we will teach our children mindfulness, and that is social emotional learning. No, it's not enough. It's not enough to say we will teach them emotional literacy, critical as that is. Emotional self-control, critical as that is. They're all here, but those are 3 I've mentioned out of 25. What about self-esteem? What about peaceful conflict resolution? What about inclusion? What about gender equality? Racial equality, we have to teach this because the world is teaching our children the opposite, right? This I've already told you about, this I've told you about, yeah. So look, the children are key in this because even a very enlightened, trained, well-paid teacher, even she or he, even she or he need the tools to be able to teach even-handedly. Look, we don't want another inequality, another postcode lottery, where children who happen to be born in a particular area and happen to go to a school that does pay and value its teachers, that has got trained teachers because they can afford them, I mean, they will be teaching the children much better than teachers who are not at all trained, than that 16-year-old who stands under a tree in a country that has 60 kids in a classroom, and she hasn't even got her matriculation certificate, let alone any teaching qualification. So we have to have a comprehensive, a prescriptive program that gives the children the equal chance. Obviously, when the teachers are fundamentally and deeply changed themselves and have undergone the personal development, the beauty of that program that Learning Curve is, they will be that much better at teaching the children with these tools. But some of them may get it, but be lazy by nature. Well, that means they wouldn't go out and curate these 24 books or similar. They wouldn't go and create these tools. So here they are. We hand them to them. Everything they need, the training of themselves, the tools they're going to train the children with. And that is the key reason for partnerships. Learning Curve does what they do brilliantly. We do what we do brilliantly. And the children are transformed, which after all is the key purpose here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Child-centered education. What else could education be except to have the child at its center?
Yeah, and I think it's so obvious to everybody here that this is a really good partnership. And I think it's that you both talked about values, and it's these shared values that are going to cement this partnership. And also, might I add, lack of ego, because where I see NGOs break down is when it's all about who's going to take credit and whose program it was. And so, you know, what you're doing is really centered in social and emotional learning, and that idea around being a shared humanity, which I know definitely resonates with me. So we're coming to, well, the last 13 minutes of the session, so we can fit in one more question before we go to the chat questions. And I wanted to ask you, Gayatri, first, and then come to Leslie about, it's wonderful to hear about this program. You've explained really well about the books, how everything is handed to the teachers so that we know they're overworked, but they're getting everything kind of spoon-fed to them, and how it works in practice. But how do you take this from individual schools and good practice to actually becoming part of the system?
Well, the policymakers do play a big role into this when we make this a part of the system. Well, for India, I would say that the concept is not entirely unfamiliar. The policymakers are very much aware of it. They do want to do something about it. At least it's growing in right now. For us, we almost have one partnership coming up where the government is willing to take our program, and implement it by themselves. So I think it's just a matter of support from the policymakers so that more and more children get benefited through the program.
And it's so wonderful to hear that, and wonderful to see that India is leading the charge on that. Because as you say, it's so much a part of the Indian culture as well. It's a big part of the religious, the big religions in India, and a big part of that family culture, I think, teaching these sorts of values. Leslie, would you like to add to that?
Well, I think everything Gayatri says is right, and does indeed answer the question. I suppose all I would add is that there is no question that one has to also put the fire in the belly of the policymakers. Their natural inclination, as is the inclination of all bureaucracies and large organizations, is to be, look, let me call a spade, to be apathetic, to take the path of least resistance. All sorts of excuses have I come across from policymakers, but there are those who take this seriously. I have now got 3 letters from 3 state governments, 2 in Mexico, 1 in India, Rajasthan. And these are policymakers who are desperate for this because they're enlightened enough to understand, you know. And it's no coincidence, Gayatri, you say that India is very well aware of this. I mean, Gandhi said, if you want to create real peace in this world, you will have to start with the children. I mean, this is ingrained in, you know, the national heroes and their, equally, you have governments, I'm sorry to say, who are so utterly greedy for money and business and put that above human life, above sustainability. And that is where a lot of the leaders in the world of late have taken us down appalling paths. Well, look what happens when an enlightened leader suddenly comes to power. Joe Biden has made one of the main planks of his spending policy early childhood. He's just committed $1 trillion to early childhood provision, which is one side of it. And I'm hoping, and I'm in talks with the US government about contents, about not just providing the facilities, because there again, there's the rationale of enabling our children, a kind of babysitting, you know, enabling our parents to go to work and earn money, which after all, they say is the main purpose of life. So, I mean, there's still some misguided thinking around the world about that, but for sure, there are pockets of extreme enlightenment. And look, it may take us another 30 years. It may take the 30 years that it'll take for Belize to suddenly find in 10 and 15 years' time that its prison incarceration figures have dropped dramatically. What's happening? We suddenly have an extra 30% of GDP. Why is that? Well, why it is that an entire generation has grown up and is not any longer committing crimes. That's why it is. And then perhaps the unenlightened leaders will say, oh, let's do the same. Or maybe they'll have got it by then, you know? So that's what I think.
In a very passionate way. I love to listen to you speak, Leslie. I want to cover some of the questions that are coming in the chat with both of you, Gayatri and Leslie, around that this is much more than an idea. So just so that you communicate correctly that Learning Curve has already had a lot of success in this area and scale, as has Think Equal. So I'd love you to both talk about what has been the success of the organisation so far. Because like I said, these are much more than just good ideas. These are actual programs that are happening across the world and affecting real children and real people. So Gayatri, would you like to talk about the success that you've had?
Sorry, could you just repeat that question? You were breaking a little for me.
Yeah, sure. I was saying that Learning Curve has already had a lot of success in the early child years and actually older children's social and emotional learning. And I'd love you to share that with the group so that they get the context that Learning Curve is already quite well on its way on this journey.
Right. So I think some of the beautiful success stories have definitely come from the teachers. And I'll link it to another question that is being asked in the chat box on how the mind shift with the teachers have happened. So it's been an amazing journey. Initially, yes, we do face resistance from the teachers because they think that it is something adding on to their work burden that they already have. But it just takes about a matter of a month or two of doing this curriculum to realize the change that is happening among the children. among themselves more. So we've heard stories where teachers are saying that, where children are saying that, teacher, you look a little stressed. Do you want to take a break? Or where children had. In fact, there was a very beautiful story when teachers were talking about empathy, right? And they realized that there is a child in the classroom who didn't have proper shoes, so he would sellotape his shoes and come to school every day because that was part of the uniform. And we realized these children had actually pooled in money together, and this is a school from the marginalized community. Okay, so they had actually pooled in a few rupees, the entire class, and bought a pair of shoes for this particular child. And these stories are coming from over 100,000 children. We've done this program in about close to 400 schools. Teachers themselves, when they are in our workshops, they start being a child themselves. And that's when they say that we have never been able to open up ourselves. We are meant to be adults. We are not allowed to be vulnerable, right? But when we talk about these workshops, we realize that these are the children who complete us, right? And then they take back that learning back into the classroom, and it's just magical. The transformation is just magical. We have district education officers who are calling our team and saying, hey, when are you doing the next program? When do we take the next lesson for the children? How can we do this online? So there is, after an initial resistance, which is very short-lived, and we don't let it get to us, because I know the beauty is coming much later than that. And these are the stories of success that I have, and I would love to keep talking. Oh, I forgot to tell, there are stories from parents. So last year during the COVID, we had sent out material to homes because children were not coming to school. And we got messages from parents that it is, our child is making us aware of how we are feeling. And so we are able to respond better. Or, today I told my child that your opinion matters to me. And that is so important. It felt so nice for both of us. So yeah, there are lots of stories. I can go on and on.
I for one love the stories, because I think it really brings it home. The single child. So Leslie, would you like to answer that? And then
I'm going to do it incredibly quickly, because I think we do want to get to those chat questions. So very quickly.
Chat questions, but we only have 3 minutes left.
Okay, so, look, for us, success means scale. This has to scale. There is no point in doing it in 1,000 classrooms here and 2,000 classrooms there. So we are well on the way to scale. We now have partnerships with the World Bank, the UNICEF, UNESCO. We are on Mission 4.7, which is chaired by Jeffrey Sachs from Columbia University, Pope Francis, Ban Ki-moon, and Audrey Azoulay, the director of UNESCO. We have, in South Africa, next week, we are training 1,000 teachers. And we are bringing the program over 2 years, and this is fully funded, bringing the program over 2 years to every single 5-year-old in the whole province of the Eastern Cape, which is the second poorest province in South Africa. Belize, I told you about, an entire country. North Macedonia, in the entire country, 3 to 4-year-old kids are learning this program. World Bank has funded. They've now asked for 8,500 more families to get our home kits, because we have different iterations of this program. We're also now working on a television series. We've done a refugee adaptation of the program to go into. It's all about scale for us. And we are being successful. We are scaling. We are now raising funding, so it's not sure yet, but I pray that we will get this funding, because we have, in another partnership in India, we've been requested to bring the program to 15,000 Anganwadis in Rajasthan. That is 500,000 children. And once that initial investment is made, which is mind-blowingly cheap because it's at cost, we don't make money on this, we're a charity, right? So once that at cost investment is made, these materials last for 10 years. That's 5.25 million children who have been transformed for the rest of their lives, 25% of the whole of Rajasthan's young children, right? Transformed for the price of $1.1 million, which is a joke compared to, you know, what is normally spent, right? And a classroom, $250 US. So it's just ridiculously cheap. It's insane that people aren't just, you know, proliferating with this, but many of them are. So those are the successes where we are proliferating. Telangana's next.
Thank you, Leslie. You've summed us up on a really high and positive note, which is exactly how I wanted us to finish. And I'd just like to repeat what you said at the beginning, which just stood out to me, which was, this is cheap. You know, if you think about what we spend, as you mentioned, on prison, on violence against women, on depression, on mental health, billions are poured into that. If only we could look long term. And, you know, I was thinking before we had this session, what does success look like? But in my heart, if there are some people that believe in the power of social emotional learning, who can get in touch with Leslie or Gayatri, their emails are in the chat, please get in touch, join us on this journey, because we need everybody to pull in the same direction. Otherwise, we're not going to see the change that we all want to see. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to Julia if there's anything she wants to add, but otherwise, a huge thank you to you. The recording, Julia has posted in the chat if you want to access it, and please share about it and talk about it and come back to us if you have any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't necessarily have anything to add, but just wanted to say that part of Catalyzing Change Week is about accelerating action. And one of the ways in which we aim to do that is through the advocacy through issue-based groups of Catalyst 2030. And this session will be the first step into launching an early childhood issue-based group, in which we'll be bringing together members from around the world to collectively advocate for this in an intersectional way. So it'll be chaired by Leslie and her amazing leadership. And we're super excited about that. So if you'd like to join, I've put my email in the chat, and please reach out to me. So I'll add you to the mailing list, and we will take this forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
मुझे तुमसे बहुत प्यार है गायत्री.
मुझे भी Leslie.
और सोनल, सुंदर सोनल, मेरा दिल पागल है.
Bye.